People say a man should speak up when he's disrespected. I've learned the opposite. Sometimes the quietest room is the one that listens. Claire's company rented a rooftop with string lights and rented laughs, the kind that tries too hard. I showed up because she asked. Navy blazer, borrowed smile. 5 minutes in, Ryan Caldwell, her boss, found me near the bar. "So you're the husband?" he said, dragging out the word. "Huh. Thought you'd be taller." That night, glasses clinked. A couple of associates tried not to grin. Claire touched my arm, then pulled her hand back like it was against the rules. I could have cut him down. I didn't. I let the silence do the measuring. I ordered a whiskey neat and let the iceless burn keep my mouth shut. Ryan kept performing. I kept watching. Because a stage only works if the audience claps, and I was done clapping. Let him talk. He didn't know the deal closing Monday would decide who kept their stage. Claire texted me 2 hours before the party. Short a +1, it would mean a lot if you came. Last-minute invitations usually hide last-minute needs, but I said yes. Married people know that sometimes you show up not because it's convenient, but because the person you love needs to see your face in the room. I pulled on the navy blazer I saved for weddings and funerals, smoothed a crease that wouldn't lay flat, and told myself this was a small price for peace. On the way, I remembered our last 2 months, late nights, a fight that shook the house, and I promised I'd keep my voice low and my temper lower. When the elevator doors opened to the rooftop, the wind hit me with that hotel soap cold. I took a breath, set my shoulders, and decided to do what older men taught me long ago. Listen first, speak last. I didn't know it yet, but those seconds of silence would end up doing most of the talking. The rooftop looked like a magazine spread trying to be casual. String lights arched over rented trees, heaters hummed, bar staff shook cocktails like maracas in a parade. Everyone wore that office party smile, wide, careful, just sober enough to keep HR happy. I've stood in a lot of rooms like that. You can tell more from what people do between laughs than from what they say. Claire waved me over, hands small and tight at her side, the way you hold a suitcase that might pop open. We did a slow lap. She pointed out departments, projects, the view that made the rent worth it. The city glittered like it had something to sell. I nodded and kept pace. I've learned not to run toward approval or away from discomfort. Both make you clumsy. As the first round of toasts started, the crowd shifted in little half circles, and a taller half circle opened beside me. That's when I met the man who loved microphones more than results. Claire did the polite thing first. "Daniel, this is Ryan Caldwell, my manager." His handshake hovered, waiting to decide whether it would be firm or theatrical. "Ryan," I said, "good to meet you." He looked at Claire before he answered me, the way a man checks the scoreboard before he talks trash. Then came the introductions to his inner circle. 2 associates who laughed early and often, a project lead who asked questions like he was already bored of the answers. I've been in sales floors and boardrooms. I know when a person is auditioning. Claire tried to smooth the edges with small talk about the view, the quarter, the new client. Ryan cut her off without cutting his smile. He stepped closer, as if proximity could do what respect couldn't. The music dipped, and for a moment the only sound was the clink of ice and the heater's low hiss. Ryan glanced at my shoes, then my face, and chose his opening line. "So you're the husband," Ryan said, pulling out the word like gum. "Huh. Thought you'd be taller." A couple of people did that snort laugh adults use when they want to be mean without committing to it. I've heard more creative insults from a Little League bleacher, but I'm also old enough to know that cruelty doesn't need creativity to land. Claire's smile stalled. She reached for my forearm, then thought better of it, as if defending me might be a violation of company policy. I could have fired back. Jokes are easy when you know where the bones are buried. Instead, I pictured my father setting down his coffee when someone crossed a line. No scene, just a look that said, "We're finished here." I met Ryan's eyes, held them the way a level holds a bubble, and said nothing. The silence felt like stepping off a curb you didn't see. People waited for a punchline. They got a pause. He mistook it for surrender. That was his first mistake. The laugh stretched thinner the second time, like a rubber band that's been left in a hot car. Ryan tried another line about who's really working late, and someone giggled into a wine glass. Claire shifted her weight and looked small. I remembered being 25 and thinking manhood was volume. By 45, you learn its density. A quiet yes, a quiet no. The ability to leave a room with your dignity and your temper both intact. I eased a half step back so I wouldn't crowd Claire, so no one could say I'd escalated anything. You can love somebody and still refuse to stand where you're not respected. The heater hummed. The skyline pretended not to stare. I let my jaw unclench and told myself the old rule. You don't wrestle a man who needs an audience. You turn off the lights. When I didn't give him the show, Ryan turned to the crowd. He raised his glass, hunting for a laugh. That's when I excused myself to the bar. People say silence is weakness. They're wrong. Silence is a tool. With the right grip, it cuts cleaner than anger ever will. I set my hands on the bar, asked for a whiskey neat, and watched the pour settle like a small lake at dusk. No ice, no rush. My heartbeat slowed to the pace of the room. My father used to tell me, if you don't like the terms, change the table. I wasn't going to argue at his table, music, co-workers, the safety of numbers. I was going to move the table without touching it. Claire's reflection hovered in the bar mirror, uncertain, then drifted away to greet someone new. She knew me well enough to sense that doing nothing wasn't the same as backing down. On nights like this, you let the story tell on itself. You don't interrupt. You let the man who needs to be loud keep talking until the room learns what you already know. That lesson was on its way. Ryan returned with a grin and a free hand. We didn't shake properly, he said, like a referee calling a do-over. He squeezed hard, the kind of grip meant to test bone and patience. I matched the pressure, not more, not less. When a man turns a handshake into a contest, he's advertising inventory he doesn't have. I watched a vein jump in his temple and let go first. There we go, he said, too bright. The associates laughed on cue. I took a slow sip of whiskey and kept my shoulders loose. You never win these things by winning them. You win by refusing to play. Ryan leaned in to deliver another line, but a manager intercepted him with a question about headcount. He gave me a parting smirk, then pivoted to perform for a fresh circle. I let the breath out I'd been saving and felt something settle. Not victory, just alignment. I'd chosen my lane, and somewhere in the room, the lane I needed was opening. From the corner, the whole rooftop read like a map. Laughter clusters. The ambitious orbiting the powerful. The tired hiding near heaters. I've stood in union halls and venture offices. The choreography is the same. People show you who they serve by how often they check the door. I finished my whiskey and let the warmth file down the edges. Claire shot me a look that said both thank you for coming and please don't make this worse. I nodded once to tell her I wouldn't. Not here, not like this. Across the deck, a silver-haired man in a black suit worked the room without working it. No sales patter, no grand gestures. Just a steady glide and eye contact that didn't ask permission. I'd seen that posture before, usually on the person who signs the checks. He lifted a champagne flute and tapped it with a spoon, once, twice. Conversations thinned to a hush. The air changed temperature, the way it does when weather turns. People turned with it. There's a sound a crowd makes when it realizes it might be on the wrong side of a joke. It isn't an apology. It's softer. Chairs stop scraping. Glasses stopped clinking, feet stopped shuffling. Ryan tried to squeeze in one last quip before the speech, but his timing missed and landed in the quiet. That's a lonely place for a punchline. I set my empty glass on the bar and stayed where I was. Some moments you approach, others you let approach you. The silver-haired man, Richard Grant, cleared his throat and looked over the tops of people's heads like he was scanning a horizon only he could see. Claire took a step toward me, then stopped, caught between roles. Employee, spouse, audience. The heater clicked off. It's funny what silence remembers when machines pause. Somewhere down on the street, a siren faded. Up here, the room waited for the richest person's words. I didn't need to move. If truth wanted me, it knew where I stood. Richard Grant tapped his glass again, not to demand attention, but to tune it. He thanked the team for the quarter, the clients for their trust, the families for the late nights. Then his eyes found me like he'd followed a string through the crowd. There's one person here who believed in this company when belief was expensive, he said. Heads turned as if on a hinge. I felt Ryan go still without looking at him. "To our lead investor," Richard said, lifting his flute. He didn't say my name yet. He didn't have to. The associates who'd snickered earlier suddenly looked like kids caught whispering in church. Claire's hand rose halfway, then fell, then rose again until it found mine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I let the words do their work. There's a gravity to gratitude when it's spoken by the person who pays the bills. It pulls the room into a new shape. You could feel the floor tilt. Richard said my name, clear and simple, and the room did that tiny ripple people do when they realized the map they were using was upside down. A few clapped too fast, a few stared at their shoes. Ryan swallowed, then lifted his glass like he'd been cheering all along. I raised my chin a degree, no higher, and gave the smallest nod a man can give and still be seen. Not triumph, not revenge, just correction. The kind that doesn't need volume because the facts bring their own microphone. Claire stood very still. I felt her fingers tighten, then loosen, then settle. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the city blinking like a scoreboard that had just updated. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. The heaters kicked back on. The night remembered to breathe. I stepped forward, not toward the applause, but toward the future conversations this moment would quietly rewrite. Behind me, the laughs were done. In front of me, respect began paying its debt. The moment Richard said my name, the rooftop changed texture. Laughter thinned. Conversations clipped themselves short. I've felt that shift before. In boardrooms when a surprise number hits the screen, and in living rooms when a doctor calls too late. It isn't noise. It's the pause after. I stood where I was and let the room rearrange. The string lights looked brighter, like someone had turned them up. Ryan kept his glass raised, pretending he'd been clapping the whole time. He didn't move toward me. He retreated into a circle that didn't want him anymore. An older associate drifted over and shook my hand, the way men do when they've just recognized a neighbor in a suit. Claire squeezed my fingers, then pulled away, as if even that small comfort might be read and judged. I didn't chase anyone. I didn't correct anyone. I let the truth sit in the middle of the deck like a centerpiece. People stared, and the staring did the work. Ryan's grin slid first, then his posture. I've watched tough guys lose their audience. It's like seeing a tent collapse when the center pole gives. He tried a line about teamwork making the dream work, but his voice found no place to land. A junior analyst nodded too fast, the way you nod when you're trying to keep your job. Ryan's eyes met mine, bounced to Richard, then dropped to the rim of his glass. I didn't smirk. I don't need victory laps. Age taught me that gloating is just bragging with a limp. He started toward me, stopped, rerouted to the bar like a man who suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. The climax wasn't the stumble, it was the hush that followed it. A woman from payroll touched his elbow and let go. Even kindness looked temporary around him now. He was still the boss on paper. But paper burns, especially on rooftops with heaters that won't stop humming. I kept my back to the rail and my hands easy. The hardest discipline I ever learned wasn't work or money. It was stillness. You can't buy it. You practice it. I felt the old advice from my father settle on my shoulders. A fire dies fastest when you stop feeding it. So I didn't feed it. No jokes, no speeches. I nodded to the owner once, accepted a few tight handshakes, and gave Claire space to orbit the conversations she still had to finish. The city below flickered like a scoreboard no one could turn off. My climax came small and private. I exhaled a breath I'd been holding since the first joke, and I didn't put it back in my chest. The heat under my ribcage cooled to something livable. I glanced at Ryan only once more, long enough to see he'd learned the first lesson of the night. Volume doesn't fix truth. Silence was doing just fine without my help. Claire stepped close as the music returned to pretending. "You invested?" she whispered, like the word might fly. "You never told me." I looked at her face, the woman who shares my coffee cups and my quiet Sundays, and saw the math of the night catch up to her. She wasn't angry yet. She was rearranging furniture in her mind, trying to find where this new piece goes. "Why?" she asked. "Why keep it from me?" I didn't answer right away. Sometimes love requires you to listen to the echo after a sentence, not just the sentence. Because people show you who they are when they think you're ordinary, I said. And I needed to know who I was standing next to. Her jaw softened. Her shoulders didn't. The climax wasn't my line. It was her eyes clearing. She saw what I saw. Respect isn't a speech, it's a reflex. Tonight proved who had it and who didn't when the wind came through. When I was a young husband, I thought raising your voice proved your point. The older I got, the more I learned that volume only proves you're out of breath. Silence burns deeper than shouting, I said to Claire, not cruel, just true. She studied me the way you study an old photograph, looking for the part that changed first. You stood there and let him talk, she said. You let them think. I lifted a palm. I let them think long enough to hear themselves. The climax arrived as a memory, my mother wiping her hands on a dish towel saying, "We don't argue with the radio. You turn it down, or you leave the room." Up here, I turned it down. Claire nodded, a tiny surrender to logic. She took my arm, and this time she didn't let go. "Let's go home," she said. I didn't argue. When the night has already told the truth, you don't stay for the encore. The elevator yawned us back to street level, and the city felt colder. In the car, the heater fought the windshield. It lost. We didn't talk at first. Married couples have a silent language that teenagers can't hear. Seatbelts clicking, rings tapping on cup holders, the sigh that means, start somewhere safe. Claire started. "You embarrassed me," she said, small but sharp. I watched a red light count down and chose a green sentence. "No," I said. "He embarrassed you. I just didn't help him hide it." The silence that followed was the kind you can't fill with radio. It asked questions I didn't want to answer yet. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have protected me." I eased the car into our neighborhood and felt the weight of two truths. I'd protected a principle, and in doing so, I'd exposed a crack. The climax was a decision. I wouldn't fix it in a driveway. I'd fix it in a chair. We walked into a kitchen that knew our arguments and our apologies. The refrigerator hummed like an old friend clearing his throat. I poured water, set her glass on a coaster we bought the year we were happiest, and sat across from her. We didn't shout. We didn't throw history like plates. We let it sit between us like a guest that stayed too long. "I didn't want a scene tonight," I said. I wanted the temperature to tell the truth. Claire pressed her fingers to her temples. "It did," she said, "and I didn't like who I was in it." That was a brave sentence. Bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it nods. The climax came quiet. I moved my glass to the middle of the table, halfway between hers and mine. "Then let's talk like we're worth hearing," I said. No scorekeeping, no sarcasm, just two people with a mortgage, some regrets, and a decision that wouldn't make itself. If tonight was a mirror, 2 months ago was the crack. It started with late nights, client dinners, end of quarter push, the harmless phrases marriages learn to respect until they don't. One night she didn't come home. Her text said, "Dead battery, couch at a friend's place, see you at dawn." Dawn came. So did she. But something else arrived with her, a distance that didn't explain itself. I remember making coffee that morning like I was handling glass, careful not to cut us both. Older folks will know this feeling. When a house is the same size but the rooms all feel farther apart. I didn't accuse. I counted. Nights. Excuses. Times her phone face down learned to stay that way. The climax wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. I started a notebook. Dates. Details. Not to punish her. To steady me. Tonight's rooftop didn't begin tonight. It began with a pen scratching something I didn't want to believe. I'm not proud of how suspicion feels, but I am proud of what I did with it. I didn't snoop. I didn't stalk. I tightened my radius and widened my eyes. In business, you verify. In marriage, you trust. When verification tries to take trust's seat, you slow down and check the map. I listened more. I asked better questions, the kind that don't sound like traps. "How late?" "With who?" "Do you need me to pick you up?" Claire answered cleanly some nights and vaguely on others. Each answer entered the notebook, not as ammunition, but as a pattern. Patterns tell the truth without ever raising their voice. The climax came the day I almost asked her to share her location and didn't. I chose to protect my soul from a habit that would empty it. That choice cost me some sleep, but it saved me from becoming a man I wouldn't respect in the mirror. At the table, Claire tried the easy story first. Most of us do. "It's just work," she said. "I'm trying to get ahead." I believed both sentences. That's the problem. True words can still be used to hide other truths. "Getting ahead shouldn't mean leaving your husband behind," I said, and kept my tone low enough for the pictures on the wall to stay. She told me about projects, about a supervisor who praises in public and cuts in private, about happy hours that last past happy. As she talked, I recognized another pattern, the kind of exhaustion that makes decent people sloppy. The climax wasn't an admission, it was a request. "Help me quit this," she said. "Help me get out clean." I didn't say yes, not yet. Leaving a job can save a marriage. It can also just move the furniture. I needed proof of direction, not just motion. We cleaned the glasses and left the table unbroken. When our house was new to us, the spare room held hope. Babies someday, guests at Christmas, a treadmill we promised to use. Tonight, it held distance. I carried a pillow down the hall without slamming a single door. Claire stood in the doorway and didn't argue. "Is this punishment?" she asked. "No," I said. "It's a pause." There's a difference older couples understand. Pauses give breath back to sentences that are running out of air. I set the pillow down and pulled the sheet back like a man folding a flag. The climax arrived small and human. Claire placed my phone charger on the nightstand, said goodnight, and meant it. No sarcasm, no threat, just sadness trying to behave. I lay there listening to the house count itself. Ice maker, water heater, the soft crack of wood settling. Somewhere between sounds, sleep found me. It didn't heal anything, but it didn't hurt me either. Sometimes that's enough for one night. Morning opened the blinds with a pale hand. I made coffee. Claire watched the kettle like it might testify. We didn't hug. We didn't avoid each other either. We stood in the same kitchen with a new rule: no lies, no theater. I stirred in one sugar, the way she likes it when we're kind to each other, and slid the mug across. "Respect doesn't die with shouting," I said. "It dies when no one notices." She nodded, eyes rimmed red but steady. "I noticed last night," she said. "I noticed who I became." That counted. Not as a cure, but as a start. The climax was a promise we could actually keep. "Today," I said, "we tell the truth, even if it's small." She agreed. We didn't solve our marriage before breakfast. Grown-ups rarely do. We just pledged to stop rehearsing the parts that were killing it. Outside, the trash truck groaned away. Inside, the house tried on a lighter kind of quiet. Morning has a way of testing last night's courage. Claire stood in the doorway with coffee she didn't drink. "Are you going to leave me?" she asked, like the words might shatter if they hit the floor too hard. I didn't rush in with comfort I couldn't guarantee. Older couples know the danger of promising what your heart can't cash. "I don't know," I said, "but we can't keep living like this." The house listened the way houses do, quiet, loyal, a little tired. She set the mug down and wrapped her arms around herself, the same way she did when the girls in high school were mean. "Tell me what you need," she whispered. The climax wasn't dramatic, it was focused. "I need respect I don't have to beg for," I said. We stood there, two adults with history and bills, deciding whether we'd be teammates or a settlement. "Start there," I told her. "Start with that." "I haven't decided," I said, "but nothing can be the same." That sentence landed between us like a clean line on a baseball field. You can walk across it, but you can't pretend it isn't there. I explained. No more half-truths sold as peace offerings, no more nervous laughs at my expense, no more late nights that arrive without names. She nodded, slow, not performative. "I hear you." It reminded me of when we paid off our first used car. We celebrated, but we also promised not to slide back into the habits that bought the debt. "If we keep the old rhythm," I said, "we'll end in the old place." The The climax was a boundary I could enforce without yelling. If it goes back to before, I added, I go. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Some lines glow on their own. Claire swallowed, blinked twice, and reached for the mug again, not to drink, but to steady her hands. If you want me to quit, I'll quit, Claire said. And it didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like someone putting their ring back on with both hands. I didn't answer right away. Older adults will know this. Big changes announced in the morning sometimes fade by dinner. Leaving could help, I said, but it won't fix what got us here. She nodded. Then what? We build new rules we actually keep, I said. Screens up during work, screens down at dinner, real check-ins, not PR updates. And if someone disrespects our marriage in public, we defend it in public. She exhaled, long and honest. I can do that. The climax arrived as a small courage. I'll tell them I'm considering leaving, she said. Today. I didn't push. I didn't praise. I just said, make sure you're choosing us, not just running from him. She closed her eyes, then opened them steadier. I'm choosing us, she said, and I'll prove it. Quitting isn't the finish line, I told her. It's the starting gun. She leaned on the counter, bracing for what came next. I need the truth every time, I said. Even when it makes you look bad, especially then. I wasn't asking for a confessional to hurt her. I was building a habit to keep us. No more softening facts to manage my reaction. I'm a grown man. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is being managed. She winced. Fair. I've managed too, in other seasons. Okay, she said. All of it. The climax was a new rule we both agreed could be spoken out loud. If either of us starts spinning, I said, the other says plain talk, and we reset. She repeated the phrase, plain talk, like she was fitting new keys onto an old ring. Start now, I added. She nodded, drew a breath that reached her shoulders, and began telling the truth I'd been waiting for. Claire started with the easy sins, late nights that were half work, half wanting to avoid tension at home. Then the smaller cuts, the jokes at my expense when the room angled that way, the times she let a sneer from Ryan pass because disagreeing would have cost her standing. None of it was a fair level, but it added up like interest you don't notice until the bill arrives. She admitted to venting about me with people who hadn't earned the right to hear our private fights. I thought of my mother warning, don't take your marriage to people who don't wish it well. Claire's voice broke exactly once, then held. The climax wasn't a confession, it was a commitment. I'm done making you the punchline to keep my place in a room, she said. I'll find other rooms. I didn't applaud. I just met her eyes and gave one nod, permission to keep going, and a promise to keep listening. Pain doesn't need props. It sits, patient, and waits to be recognized. I let it sit. I didn't list countercharges from my notebook. I didn't turn her admissions into a prosecutor's closing. Older men know that winning a point can lose a person. That stung, I said, plain talk. Especially the part where you left me alone in rooms that were laughing, she nodded, eyes shiny but steady. I did. We let the word hang until it stopped echoing. The temptation to declare a new era right there tugged at me. But new eras require ink, not speeches. The climax was simple action. I slid the notebook across the table and closed it in front of us both. This doesn't go away, I said, tapping the cover, but it stops growing today. She put her hand on the notebook too, not to take it, to share the weight. For the first time in weeks, I felt the floor stop tilting. That evening, Claire asked me to dinner. Somewhere quiet, she said, but not hidden. I knew what she meant. Not a victory lap, a statement. You learn, after 40, that some apologies need witnesses, not for show, but for proof to yourself that you've changed the route. We picked a small Italian place with booths deep enough for secrets and lighting kind to tired eyes. On the way, she took my hand at a red light and didn't let go when it turned green. The climax arrived in the doorway. A pair from her office stood to leave. She didn't look away. Daniel, she said to them, clear and proud. My husband. No nervous laugh, no qualifier, just a name and a claim. The younger one swallowed. The older one smiled the way women smile when they recognize backbone. We slid into a booth. For the first time in a long time, the menu looked like food instead of a test. We ordered simple: pasta, sauce that listens, a bottle that doesn't need to be explained. Claire talked to the server like a person, not a prop. And when another colleague walked in, she didn't flinch. She waved him over, introduced me like she'd just won something she wanted the world to know about. "This is Daniel," she said. "He's the one who kept me honest when I didn't want to be." That could have felt like theater. It didn't. It felt like humility in public, which is rarer than pride in private. My climax came when she corrected the colleague's small joke at my expense. Light, but still a cut. "Not funny," she said. The man apologized to me, not to her. I said, "We're good," and meant it. After he left, Claire exhaled. "That felt new," she said. "Good new," I answered. The food arrived warm. We ate like adults who had decided not to waste their second chance on old habits. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "All in or nothing," I said, not as a bluff, as architecture. No part-time marriage, no weekday spouse with weekend exceptions. If you're in, you're in. She didn't scan the room for help. She didn't bargain. "I'm in," she said, and the words didn't wobble. Older folks will understand. That's when you ask for specifics, not speeches. Then we put it in writing, I said. Boundaries we both sign. Phones down at 7. Defend each other in public, correct in private. If one of us slips, we say plain talk and tell the truth. If the slips stack, we get help, not revenge. She nodded through the list like a woman agreeing to terms she helped write. The climax was an action. She pulled a pen from her purse and clicked it, as if her hand wanted to sign something right there on the linen. I laughed, soft. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll make it official." Back home, I didn't move my pillow. I also didn't pretend the hurt had vanished. Mercy without memory is just amnesia. "I'm giving us one bed," I said, "not a blank slate." She understood. We brushed teeth in the same bathroom without narrating our feelings, a small piece older couples learn to value. Before lights out, I set 2 things on the nightstand, my notebook and her hand. "This stays," I said, tapping the cover, "and so do you." The climax was a promise sized to fit a Tuesday. "If we wake up mad," I said, "we talk before 10. She smiled, the tired kind that means, "I'll try." We turned off the lamp. The house shifted into its nightly chorus, pipes, branches on the siding, the faint hum of the street. My mind tried to rehearse old arguments. I let them pass like late trains. Forgiveness wasn't here yet, but its luggage had arrived. Morning brought proof. Ryan called before Claire's coffee cooled. I heard his voice through the little speaker that makes men bolder than they deserve. Big raise, bigger title, travel that would keep her out of the house, in a good way. I watched her face still and then harden. "No," she said, once. He tried again, adding flattery like sugar to bitter tea. "No," she said, again, and looked at me while she said it. The climax sharpened when he joked that I'd enjoy the extra quiet. Claire didn't take that bait. "My husband deserves respect," she said. "If the job requires me to lose that, it isn't a job I want." She hung up slowly, like a woman setting down a hot pan. We stood there with the silence after a line in the sand. Some silences are lonely. This one felt like shade. "You okay?" I asked. "Better than yesterday," she said. "A lot better." Claire typed her resignation with the kind of care you use signing a mortgage. Every letter steady, no flourishes. She didn't make a speech about villains or victims. She wrote what was true. New priorities, leaving with gratitude, handing off her work responsibly. Then she read one last line aloud to me. "A marriage is a room worth defending." She hit send. That was the climax. No confetti, just a door closing gently and the air getting easier to breathe. We walked outside and felt the sun do its simple job. On the porch, she slid her phone across the table, face up. "No more secrets," she said. I turned mine over too, not as surveillance, as symmetry. Somewhere downtown, a man who loved microphones would find out he'd lost one more audience member. Out here, we had our own stage. No lights, no script, just 2 people deciding how to speak to each other when nobody's clapping. Claire laid her badge, laptop, and a neatly coiled charger on the kitchen table like pieces of a uniform she'd outgrown. We double-checked the handoff list, files labeled, meetings reassigned, a note of thanks that didn't rewrite history. Older adults will know this rhythm, the night before a move, when boxes sit by the door and the house listens. She asked if I'd walk her in. Not to make a scene, she said. To make it simple. We drove without music. The building's lobby smelled like fresh coffee and old deadlines. She took one last breath by the turnstile, then nodded. The climax came small and steady. She clipped the badge to her blouse one last time, not to wear it, to return it with dignity. "Let's do this," she said. We stepped into an elevator that remembered too many late nights and pressed the floor where she'd learned both pride and regret. The doors closed on the past, and we rode toward a cleaner room. I stood a half step behind her at reception, close enough to be counted, far enough to let her lead. Claire laid the badge down and gave her laptop the gentle push you give a gift you've already said goodbye to. The receptionist's face softened. "Good luck," she said, meaning it. I didn't speak. My role today was presence, not commentary. We signed the equipment form. Boxes checked, no missing items, no excuses. The building's security lights made everything look cooler, sharper. Claire handed over a small stack of physical files, labeled in her careful handwriting. "You're making my job easy," the receptionist said. "I'm making my life easier," Claire answered. The climax was a pen scratch. One last signature that turned role into history. I kept my hands folded. Some victories live quiet and wear sensible shoes. We turned from the counter and headed toward the open office. One more room to finish right. If an apology needs to be said, it should be said where damage started. The bullpen slowed when we stepped in. Heads lifted, whispers braided, and a few phones rose like periscopes. I've seen that posture in church foyers and grocery store aisles, people pretending not to watch while they watch. Claire's shoulders squared, the way you do before a hard conversation. I didn't glare at the cameras. Every generation gets its own chorus. Theirs just hums at 4K. A younger analyst mouthed, "Is it true?" to a friend. I looked past them to the window line where the city did its steady work and remembered something my father said. "You can't manage a crowd, but you can manage your face." I kept mine neutral. The climax arrived in a decision. We would stop by her team's pod, then the main walkway, then the lobby. No ducking side doors, no rush. If gossip was going to draft our story, we might as well hand it the facts. Claire squeezed my fingers once. "Ready?" And I squeezed back. "Go." Ryan waited near this coffee machine like a man guarding a gate he no longer owned. He smiled without warmth. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. Same cadence, thinner power. Claire didn't flinch. "On time," she said. He lifted a cup as if to toast, then thought better of it. "Shame to waste all that potential," he added, glancing at me for sport. I let the sentence float past like trash on a river. Older men learn this trick. Don't wrestle with what the water will carry away. Claire's voice stayed level. "I'm not wasting anything. I'm choosing different." A couple of phones tilted higher. Ryan tried a laugh. It landed with no friends. The climax was restraint. I didn't speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because today belonged to Claire's voice, not mine. She turned from him, not with a flounce, with a fact, and we walked to the open aisle where the workday's noise had thinned into listening. Claire stopped where the rows met, the place where people pass through and pause. She didn't climb a chair, she didn't ask for quiet. She let the room find it. "I owe a few words," she said, mostly to myself. She looked at me, then back to them. "I laughed when I should have spoken. I stayed late when I should have gone home. And last week, I let someone I love become a joke in front of people who knew better." That last line landed. You could hear keys stop tapping. "I'm leaving because I don't like who I became here," she said. "And because I want to be the kind of wife who defends her husband in public and corrects him in private." The climax wasn't tears, it was clarity. She closed her hands, opened them again, and finished. "I'm grateful for what I learned. I won't repeat what I shouldn't have learned." A breath moved through the room, the kind people take before they clap. Applause began tentatively, 2, 3 pairs, then built into something that sounded like relief. People weren't cheering a resignation. They were cheering a choice they wished they'd made sooner. Even the receptionist craned to see. Ryan kept his hands at his sides, then pretended to check his watch. Pride has terrible timing. Claire didn't bow. She nodded once, the way grown-ups do when they mean it. The climax showed up as a single gesture. The senior payroll clerk, a woman with a spine you can hear in her shoes, stepped forward and hugged Claire. Quick, proper, full of approval. That broke the line. A few more goodbyes, a couple of well wishes, and the current shifted us gently toward the exit. I stayed a step behind, hand at the small of Claire's back, not steering, just reminding, you're not alone in this hallway. The clapping thinned, then stopped. We didn't speed up. We earned slow. In the lobby glass, we caught our reflection. Claire in front, me just behind, my palm hovering like a guardrail she could use or ignore. I kept it there. Some men want to narrate their wife's courage. I wanted to witness it. A security guard nodded, the kind of nod older men give when they recognize a clean line drawn. Take care now, he said. You too, I answered. The climax was the simplest motion. Claire set her badge on the marble counter, not tossed, not hidden, just placed. Evidence that today we traded noise for posture. The receptionist slid a small envelope toward her, personal items from a drawer, a plant clipping, 2 pens, a photo of us from a better summer. Claire looked at the picture, then at me, and smiled with the future in it. We turned toward the elevators. Behind us, phones lowered. Whatever video they got, it would show what mattered, respect walking out upright. The doors closed and the building's hum faded to a softer key. Claire leaned into the rail and let the air out of the week. First time he's speechless, she said, half disbelief, half relief. He'll find new words, I answered, but they won't be ours to carry. She laughed, the kind that fixes something small and real. Older adults will recognize this sigh, the one you take after a funeral when you finally say, okay, home. The elevator stopped. For a beat, we just stood there, not rushing to be done, letting the quiet teach us what noise never does. The climax fit in a sentence we'd been circling. Thank you for standing behind me, she said. I wasn't behind you, I said. I was with you. The doors opened to daylight that felt earned. We walked out without looking back. When the past wants your attention, make it ask politely. That night we picked a diner with coffee that tells the truth and pie that doesn't overpromise. No white tablecloths, just a booth with a view of the parking lot and the kind of server who calls you hun without auditioning for a tip. We ordered meatloaf and split a slice of lemon meringue. Laughter came back in small pieces, the way it does after families survive a scare and find their living room again. Claire said grace over dinner, short and unpolished. Thank you for today, she whispered, and for the next right thing. The climax arrived as something ordinary. We laughed at the same joke at the same time and didn't look around to see who noticed. On the drive home, we didn't draft speeches for tomorrow. We let the radio pick old songs. Sometimes rebuilding trust sounds like AM stations and turn signals that cancel themselves. Rebuilding didn't need fireworks. It needed calendars and candor. For 3 weeks, we practiced out loud. I'm running late, 30 minutes. I'm tired and short, it's not about you. I need a walk before we talk. Phones went face up on the counter at 7. We sent each other schedules like 2 foremen sharing a job site. Not romantic maybe, but romance appreciates what order builds. We looked at money, not to fight, but to tell it where to go like adults who remember debt. Sundays we walked the neighborhood and left the heavy talk for after coffee. The climax showed up in a Wednesday nothing. Claire texted a photo of her desk at 5:01 with the caption, headed home. No proof asked, none needed. It felt like a small deposit in an account we plan to keep for life. Trust grows like that, boring, daily, faithful as trash day. We met with an attorney who drafts agreements for people who still love each other enough to write things down. No threats, no traps, just terms we both can live with when we're tired. Phones down at 7, defend in public, correct in private, quarterly check-ins like the car gets. Oil, filters, feelings. If either of us starts spinning, the code phrase is plain talk. If we can't stop the spin, we call a counselor before we call a friend. The climax was the pen's weight in my hand. I signed first, not because I'm the hero, because I'm the husband. Claire signed next, steady, and slid her palm across the paper like sealing an envelope we both addressed. We didn't frame it. We put it in the drawer with passports, documents you hope you won't need, but you're glad exist when a trip finds you. We walked out lighter, not because pain vanished, but because order stood up. That evening, I recorded a note on my phone, just for me. Changed behavior is the loudest apology, I said, to hear it in my own voice. We sat on the porch as the neighborhood dimmed, the kid with the bike bell, the dog that announces the mail, the couple arguing gently about tomatoes. Ordinary proof that life keeps going if you let it. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. No speech, just a presence that didn't need a camera. The climax was a quiet agreement to stop chasing back to normal and build better than before. We took a picture of the sky and didn't post it. Some things work harder when they're ours alone. Inside, the house remembered our footsteps and didn't brace. Outside, the streetlight flicked on like a nod. Tomorrow would bring new work. Tonight brought a kind of rest I hadn't felt since we were new, earned, simple, and finally respectful. The email arrived just after lunch, dressed up like an opportunity. Subject line, consulting project, quick win. Ryan Caldwell CC'd 2 people with titles long enough to sound important. He dangled a generous hourly rate, flexible evenings, and the promise of keeping your hand in the game. I've read enough contracts to hear the parts written in invisible ink. Flexible meant missing dinner. Evenings meant old habits knocking. We value your leadership, he wrote, then added a smiley I could feel rolling its eyes. Claire read it standing by the sink, hands drying on a towel we bought on vacation when we were simpler. She didn't flinch. She said my name the way you do when you want a witness, not permission. The climax wasn't a speech. It was her cursor moving to forward. She typed 2 words. Your thoughts? Then she hit send to me and turned the screen so I could see the whole thing. No editing, no spin, just daylight. I read the message twice, not to catch her, to catch myself. There are deals that pay you money and cost you peace. Looks expensive, I said, meaning the second thing. Claire nodded and opened a new window. She drafted a reply that would fit on a postcard. Thanks for thinking of me. I'm not available. Wishing you well. No hallway of explanation for him to walk down. She sent it, then clicked to contacts and slid his number into the trash. On her phone, she pressed the option older adults learn to love. Block. The climax was the silence that followed when his name no longer had a path to ours. She placed the phone face up between us, not as proof, as posture. I'm choosing a smaller life with fewer alarms, she said. Me too, I answered. We didn't high-five. We made coffee. Sometimes the grown-up celebration is a quiet kitchen and a calendar that keeps its promises. A day later, Richard Grant called with the voice of a man who has nothing to sell and everything to steward. Coffee? He asked. We met at a place that roasts its beans like church roasts its sermons, steady, no tricks. He thanked me for believing early when belief was expensive and for staying calm when the room wanted noise. Older men talk about legacy the way carpenters talk about beams. You want the wood that won't warp. Richard didn't ask me to interfere or to return anyone's favor. He just said, you acted like an owner, not an audience. The climax was a sentence I wrote down on a napkin. Money finds performance. Respect finds character. He offered introductions for Claire if she wanted a cleaner shop. I told him we weren't shopping for applause. Good, he said. Applause is bad equity. We stood, shook hands like men who own their word, and left the rest of the cups for younger conversations. On the drive home, I took the long way, the route that passes the little park where we used to time our walks to the street light. I've chased money, and I've chased pride. Both run faster than you do after 50. Respect keeps pace, waits on porches and asks if you want water. I thought about the boardrooms I've sat in and the kitchens I've nearly lost. If forced to choose, I'll take a faithful kitchen every time. The climax arrived not as a revelation, but as inventory. A marriage that can bear truth, a phone that goes quiet at 7, a wife who will stand in a hallway and declare the person she wants to be. That list beat any quarterly report. When we pulled into the driveway, Claire reached across the console and squeezed my hand. Worth it? She asked. Worth more than that, I said. Some returns don't print on statements. They show up in how you sleep. We went back to the rooftop on a Saturday, midday sun, no cocktails, just the view that made the city look honest again. String lights hung there like a memory that had stopped trying to be pretty. We leaned on the rail where the wind behaves and said nothing for a while. Older couples know that returning to a place can clean it if you let time rewrite the caption. This is where I forgot who I was, Claire said. And where I remembered, I answered. The climax was an ordinary vow spoken where the damage started. Next time, we leave early, she said, smiling. Next time, I said, we go somewhere that doesn't charge extra for noise. A jogger passed. A kid pointed at a helicopter. We stood there like two people who had paid admission and gotten their money's worth. Peace, perspective, and the sense that the stage no longer owned us. Then we took the stairs down, together. Halfway down, the phone rang, the old number trying one more door before quitting the building. Claire didn't pocket it. She set it on the step and tapped speaker. Claire, Ryan began, already softer. About that consulting thing. There's flexibility. She didn't ask what kind. Respect isn't negotiable, she said. I'm not available. He tried a backup offer. No, she repeated, and this time the words sounded like a lock clicking into place. The climax was how quickly the moment ended. She pressed end, then scrolled to confirm the block had taken. No dramatic delete, no victory speech, just a boundary doing its job. We kept walking. Sunlight met us at the lobby doors. I opened one, she opened the other. You learn that in marriage, when both hands work, both doors swing easier. Outside, the air felt like it belonged to us again. Inside, a stage waited for someone else's show. Back home, Claire held the phone out the way a diver shows a clear gauge. I didn't clap. I nodded. There's a dignity in not narrating every win. We folded laundry like people who plan to wear these clothes a long time. She tucked a note in my sock drawer. 2 words. Plain talk. It wasn't an apology. It was a promise to keep the channel open. The climax lived in a small exchange at dinner. Our server misheard my order and Claire corrected him gently. He said grilled, not fried. Not a big deal, unless you've stood on a rooftop and watched someone let you be a punchline. Thank you, I said. Always, she answered. We ate in a pocket of quiet that didn't feel empty. After dishes, I took out the trash without being asked. On the porch, we watched the neighbor teach his grandson how to throw a ball, elbow up, step, release. Some lessons age well. Weeks found their rhythm. 7 o'clock meant phones down, not because we're saints, because we're tired and want each other more than headlines. We cooked more than we ordered. Laughter came back in full sentences. On Thursdays, we walked the big loop and waved at the couple with the porch swing. On Sundays, we left work words in the glove box before church. The climax was a small ceremony no one else witnessed. At 7:01 one night, Claire looked at her buzzing screen, then turned it face down and turned her face toward me. I'm here, she said. I believed her. We aren't performing wellness for anyone. We're doing the unglamorous tasks that keep a house soft at the edges, paying bills on time, leaving notes where tempers might flare, saying I'm sorry before I'm right. It isn't Instagram famous. It's durable. The kind of life that survives winters and makes room for spring. Claire didn't sprint into the next job. She walked. She met with a small firm where the partners keep their own calendars and the culture doesn't pretend to be a family to excuse bad manners. They asked good questions and didn't flinch at honest answers. She told them the rooftop story without polishing it. We don't do microphones, the senior partner said. We do work. The climax came when they offered her a role with clearer hours and a manager who measures results, not gossip. Claire looked at me, not to ask, but to include. If the terms change, she told them, I go home first and talk it through. They agreed. We left without a start date carved in stone, just a handshake we trusted more than some contracts I've seen. In the car, she exhaled. Feels like a clean door, she said. Let's walk through it together, I answered. We drove home with the radio off and the windows down. We kept our promise about help. Tuesday at 4, we sat in a counseling office that smelled like peppermint tea and new carpet. The therapist didn't hunt villains. She hunted patterns. You defended the marriage in public, she told Claire. now defended in private by telling the truth before fear asks for it. To me, you used silence like a tool. Keep it a tool, not a wall. We nodded like people who'd already lost enough time to pride. The climax was an assignment we could actually do. 3 5-minute check-ins a week. No fixing, just naming. I'm tired. I'm anxious. I'm grateful. It sounded simple, which is why it works. On the way out, I scheduled the next 4 sessions before momentum got ideas. In the parking lot, Claire took my hand. "Thank you for not waiting until we were bleeding," she said. "Thank you for not waiting until I shouted," I answered. We got in the car and kept going. One evening, we sat on the steps and watched the streetlight warm up, that slow glow older neighborhoods know by heart. I thought about Ryan and the rooftop and the way a room can decide who you are before you open your mouth. He thought I was the joke. He became the lesson. Not my lesson, his. Mine was simpler. Speak when it builds. Be silent when it reveals. The climax was a line I'll keep. Dignity is louder than applause and quieter than revenge. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. "We're not who we were," she said. "Good," I answered. "We're who we're becoming." Somewhere a kid practiced trumpet, somewhere a dog negotiated bedtime. Ordinary life, the kind that doesn't need an audience. I turned my phone face down at 7 sharp. Claire did the same. The world kept spinning without us for a while, and for once, that felt like the point. I'm on the porch, watching the streetlight warm up the way it always has, steady and on time. The house is quiet in that good, earned way. No speeches left, just chairs that remember who sits in them. Here's what I know now. Silence isn't surrender, it's aim. You use it to line up what matters and let the noise miss you. When respect is gone, love is already broken. Doesn't matter how nice the vacation photos look. But when respect is rebuilt, it's the only glue that lasts. Not flowers, not grand gestures. Daily truth, plain talk, doors held open on purpose. We're not back to normal. We're forward to better. I turn my phone face down at 7. Claire does the same. The world keeps spinning without us for a while, and that's the point. If you've lived long enough, you know, peace isn't loud, it's reliable. What would you do if your partner's boss humiliated you? Walk away or fight for respect? Tell me below. I'm listening.